So pressing record and we are recording. So hi everyone, I'm really excited today to bring to you one of our clients who is building her lifestyle business with us, and she's specializing in a very particular niche area around conflict. So her name is Belinda Lynch, and she is the creator or the founder of Redefining Conflict. So welcome, Belinda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm really excited to be able to share a little bit of your story about your business, but even more so about your backstory of conflict and why you've decided to move into this space. So, tell us a little bit about why conflict is an area you're passionate about helping people with.
Okay, so it's actually been a bit of a personal journey, which
Yes.
is really, quite exciting. My background, so I've been in, I've worked for nearly 20 years, dare I say, in HR,
Yep.
and I have a degree in psychology. And so I've always been interested in the psychology behind the way that people do things. And it's always been one of the things that has been a special interest for me, and it's carried me through into HR. And gosh, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started working in. I'd worked for a government department for a long time and had started working in their conflict resolution area, so dealing with employee complaints,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with conflict, going to Human Rights Commission and Equal Opportunity Commission, and going through conciliation processes in those arenas as well.
Yep.
So that was something that I really loved doing.
Yep.
And then I also had a bit of a personal journey
Yep.
through a divorce and custody dispute. And so that
There's
was
some
really
conflict
challenging for me
often.
because
If conflict's going to
sorry.
come up, it's usually around that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a particularly acrimonious process.
Yep.
And one of the ways that I managed to cope with that, I think, is I'm one of those people who do research. So I try to work out how to deal with situations that are challenging with me, or things that are challenging me.
Yep.
So one of the things I did is really start to delve into conflict resolution, how it impacts different people, different personalities.
Yep.
And it really started from there. So from a professional perspective and from a personal thing, I found some really interesting elements of conflict, and I
Yep.
started to do a lot of research into that area.
Yeah.
And then I decided to look at doing mediation. And so that's been generally what my process has been. So I've been really, through research and work experience, or my work history, really got into trying to understand and help people through conflict, because
Yeah.
it's actually something that everybody faces in every single relationship that they have,
Yep.
but very few people know how to deal with it effectively.
Yeah.
And usually when you're in the emotion of a situation, it can be really hard to actually step out of that and be able to move forward in an effective way. So that's what I'm trying to do, to help people with, is really pull it apart and to try to get the most out of conflict.
Yeah.
What I've generally found is a lot of people have, view conflict as a negative thing,
Yeah.
and that's something that I always did, because I'm an introverted type of person,
Yep.
and so conflict traditionally had scared me. So learning about conflict and the way that it actually can have a positive outcome, has been really an interesting journey for me.
Yeah, that's
So
fantastic.
that got into to really be sort of passionate about it.
And I love that conflict is an area that once challenged you, as it does many people. Like, a lot of people have conflict up there as one of their greatest fears.
That
But
absolutely.
this is why I'm so excited about your business, because I believe there's a massive need in it. The name Redefining Conflict, we'll talk about that in a moment. But going into organizations, because as you know, I have a background in leadership training and workplace culture.
Mm-hmm.
I would say hands down, the biggest cost to any organization, as in the biggest block to them, is the conflict, or maybe more so the way they're managing or not managing the conflict. What would you say about that? Like, how much does conflict cost organizations, do you think, Belinda?
Well, I've seen some statistics that would suggest that managers can sometimes be spending 50 to 70% of their time dealing with challenging conversations or conflict within their workforce.
Yeah.
And so it's an enormous cost. It's about really, and most of those managers would suggest they don't actually know how to help people manage it themselves, or what advice to be able to give them. So if you've got some dysfunctional conflict resolution strategies, they really can't pull it apart and can't see a path through it. And often managers will, in their, with the best intentions, make the situation worse, because they'll adopt avoidance type situations and they won't deal with it. Giving people the advice, well, just get on with it, or just do your thing, or whatever it might be, can be largely unhelpful, because issues will just fester and it compounds and becomes worse for people. And then you start seeing a lot of other behaviours, like people not being able to manage those relationships anymore, or becoming hypersensitive to anything that their colleague or somebody, or even that the line manager themselves might say in relation to a particular matter. And all of a sudden, something that could have been dealt with really quickly becomes a large issue for them. And so dealing with conflict right at the base level can prevent a lot of time and energy and a lot of negativity in the organisation down the track.
Because it does compound. It's kind of like a splinter that's never been pulled out, and it gets infected, and then all of a sudden, if you have a splinter and it's sore, the smallest little touch can be quite, so people become hypersensitive with unaddressed conflict. Would you say, so avoidance is a big mistake that I think organizations make around conflict. Are there any other big mistakes that you've seen either individuals or organizations make when it comes to addressing conflict?
I think that one of the other things they do is make it about a disciplinary process. So you'll have an organisation who will say two people are in a conflict about a particular situation, and it all of a sudden that relationship's breaking down. People potentially are not being able to complete their work or meet benchmarks that they would ordinarily do, and it becomes a performance issue or a misconduct type of issue. So then you start dealing with them from that perspective.
So things almost become exacerbated. Is that what you mean? So it's like
it becomes and it's almost like they have an aggressive approach to it.
Yeah.
So trying to say to somebody, you have to do this or you have to do that, but really what organizations need to do is one of the most effective strategies for dealing with conflict is actually trying to listen to what the parties have got to say.
Yeah.
And so really trying to understand, well, what is the basis for the concerns that the person has? And it doesn't matter necessarily whether you agree or disagree, but really trying to listen to how it impacts them.
Yeah.
How it impacts the work that they're doing. One of the biggest things is that two people may be working on different elements of a particular project, and their work will impact each other. Say one's got to finish something before the other, and so there can be angst if one doesn't finish it to the standard, or if they don't complete it in time. So then the other part of the organisation is behind the eight ball and unable to meet their deadline. So having conversations, being transparent about the impact, and really listening to people, even asking them one of the things that organisations don't necessarily do is ask the person on the ground level, well, how do you see this issue being resolved? What does a resolution look like for you? Or how can we make it better?
Yeah.
To really use that person as a resource to be able to resolve the issue that they're trying to problem solve.
And I think that's so important, isn't it? Because conflict often has people go to head and they're too busy trying to prove their point or avoid the situation. Whereas what you're saying is we need to instead seek to just understand, not even necessarily agree. Just understand where the other person's coming from. Yeah, brilliant. And so, yeah, sorry, go on.
And really try to identify what are the common goals. Because if I'm working with a colleague, we're actually trying to achieve the same thing essentially. They may do it differently, but how can my skills, my personality, my background or knowledge, whatever it might be, really work together with that other person's and achieve the outcome that the organisation is wanting to achieve?
Yep.
So rather than a lot of organisations almost set people in competition with each other.
Yeah.
So you've got two colleagues that are trying to compete, and it becomes unhealthy because it inhibits their capacity to be able to work together and collectively.
Yeah.
So that is a big issue for some organisations.
So conflict is definitely a big issue for, I think, a lot of organisations.
Yeah.
I used to hear all the time, well, it's just human nature. You're never going to be able to get rid of the conflict. I love to challenge people back on that. And I like that you take it even further and talk about the fact that conflict doesn't mean it's bad, but we can redefine how we address conflict. Can you imagine or do you believe that organisations can change the way they perform by eliminating negative conflict? Like, do you think that's even possible?
They may not, because you're going to have personality differences, you may not eliminate negative conflict altogether, but what you can do is turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
So it's about recognising this is an issue for these two people or for the organisation, and really try to turn that around. And that's where redefining conflict comes from, is really trying to turn it around. Okay, what are the opportunities here for growth?
Yeah.
Is there, just because I've done it, I have an issue. I often hear organisations say, well, historically, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's the right way, nor does it mean that it's the most effective way to move forward.
Yeah.
So from a negative or a perceived negative conflict can come so many new ideas about brainstorming. Okay, this is the issue.
Yep.
How can we brainstorm ideas about how we can move forward? How we can approach this conflict or this issue from a different perspective. And that's one of the things that I'll do with people quite often is brainstorm what would an outcome look like? What would a completed project look like? What would a positive relationship look like for you?
Yeah.
And then how do we achieve all of those things? So taking it back to what is it that you want, or what do you want it to look like? And then, well, okay, how do we get there?
Yeah. And so one of the things that you like to do is partner with organisations to look at more of a whole approach. Can you talk us through how you do that? Like, why is that needed? Because I know you've got a background in mediation, similar to me. I have a background in one-day workshop facilitation, and I got to realise that this whole one-hit wonder approach wasn't working. But what's your view of how an organisation can eradicate the costs that can fester up around negative conflict? How do you do
One of the things that I do when I go into an organisation is what I call a conflict health check.
Yeah.
So that will be, you can give the health check. It's a survey that you can give the whole employee base or a portion sample of the employees, the survey, to get a really good picture about what conflict looks like in their organisation. So it looks at asking people a variety of questions, which I've divided up into about 6 sections.
Yep.
And we look at what their perception of conflict is, what their understanding of conflict is in the organisation, how they believe that the organisation deals with conflict. There's a lot of organisations that think they do a really good job, but their employees don't think that they're being heard.
Yeah.
And don't think that that any complaints that they may raise are being addressed properly.
Yeah.
So we break it all down and we get an employee perspective. This is what conflict looks like in your organisation.
Yeah.
And then we start to look at how that can be resolved. Now, sometimes it can be, we can look at the policy, the procedure that's attached to conflict resolution and try to get some good guidance for employees to deal with with any issues that might occur.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at some training. I've run some training programs for organisations where we look at various different areas, and I can tailor the training depending on what the health check identifies, those problem areas. And so we can look at things like dealing with difficult personalities, for example, or personality profiles. What does that look like? How do you deal with somebody that challenges the way that you may look at conflict?
Yep.
Or looking at what are the organisations or the individuals' dysfunctional conflict styles, and how do we improve those? How do we take those and make them into something positive?
Yeah.
Also, if you think that you've come to loggerheads with somebody, how do we pull that apart and move past that? And so we can look at all training from a number of different perspectives to really address the conflict. One of the other really successful areas that I work with organisations is one-on-one conflict coaching.
Yeah.
So I do conflict coaching before I enter into a mediation process.
Yep.
And I think that it sets the mediation up for a much healthier conversation.
Yeah.
Because I give each person a number of things to think about and a number of strategies that they can use in that conversation.
Yeah.
But the conflict coaching will work one-on-one with somebody and drill down into what is the conflict style they revert to.
Yeah, right.
They may revert to one area in their personal life, but another area in their work life. Or it depends on the individual, the circumstances, what conflict style they might adopt.
Yep.
And breaking that down for the person and being able to identify some alternate strategies. Because if someone's an avoider, for example, they're often really quite concerned about building up conflict or addressing conflict with anybody.
Yeah.
So what do you do? What does somebody do in that set of circumstances to be able to address that conflict better for them and give them some strategies that are really specific to them?
Yep.
And help them to be able to move forward.
And so you're talking about conflict styles there. Is that something that you can help organisations understand? What are the styles and how to identify them?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. We can look at, there's usually some sort of standard problematic profiles within an organisation, and I've done some workshops on that, looking at, how do you deal with a narcissistic personality or the drama queen that's in the organisation?
Yeah.
Those personalities that are usually drawn to conflict.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with them? If you're facing somebody in that situation, what are the strategies that you can put in place? And a lot of the time it looks at what are the boundaries you need to set with these people?
Yeah.
If you're going to enter into a healthy conversation, this is what you're prepared to do, this is what you're not prepared to do, and the behaviour that you're willing to accept as part of that conversation.
Because I think conflict can become a bit addictive for some people, would you say?
It is.
Yeah.
For somebody who likes... There are two types of, there's two types of people who like conflict. It's those people who just get a buzz out of being in conflict with people. They find it entertaining. But also there's those people who like to start conflict and sit back and watch it happen between other people.
Okay.
So often they'll fuel the fire for two other people. And often you'll see it, the gossip type of thing, and say, well, look at these two people, and they get a buzz from just, watching that unfold.
Yeah.
And so we look at strategies on how you might be able to address those types of people, but also the strategies to address the conflict that's happening real time for people.
So for people that are watching this interview, I'm sure that you've got lots of different strategies to address conflict, but what would be 3 simple, foolproof strategies that work with conflict?
Yeah. So probably the main thing I say is become curious.
Yeah.
That is probably the number one thing that people need to do. So they need to look at what is happening for the other person and understanding, as I said previously, understanding the impact, understanding the emotions. One of the biggest things, people will enter into conflict if they feel like their back's up against the wall or they're feeling powerless. So what is it that person is feeling about the issue that's being discussed? And it may well be that they're losing some sort of power or something that, and that can be quite threatening for people. So trying to understand the issue, trying to understand what the a suitable outcome looks like for that person.
Yeah.
So it's really important to ask lots of questions, be curious, look at really pulling the conflict apart. And one of the interesting things about that is that when you get to the bottom of a conflict, quite often it's not what the source of the conflict is not what people think it is.
That's so true. Yeah.
So it might be that the final straw might be that someone didn't finish a piece of work in time. But in actual fact, there is a whole load of stuff underneath the surface that has actually caused the explosion to occur, as we call it. So that's probably the number one thing. So being curious. The other thing is really just listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being interested in what the person has to say,
and
listening, not to respond, not to just fill the airspace, but really hearing what that other person is telling you about the conflict.
And have you got any tips on how to do that? Because I know that's a thing that we struggle with in today's world, because we're so distracted so easily. Our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So do you have any tips for people on how does one listen in a focused way?
Well, one of the things that you can do, because we often think that we're listening. And so one of the strategies that you can do is mirroring. So asking the person or checking in with them, saying, what I am hearing you saying is this, or what I am hearing you, the impact to be is this. So really trying to, I suppose, just reinforce with the person that what you think you're hearing is what they're saying.
Yes. And
so often you can explore that further with them. If you're not on the same page, you can check in.
Yeah.
And that can be when you're, the next part of, or the next key to resolving a conflict is looking at what a projected outcome. So where to from here? And when you're actively listening, you're reinforcing to that person about what they want from this process, or how they see it resolved. And so by brainstorming how to move forward, you can really get an understanding of what the parties need to happen, what they want to happen, and then try to identify, well, once we've got everything on the table, how do we move forward so that it meets both of our needs, opposed to just one side? So we never talk about someone winning the conflict, it's all about collaboration. So how do both parties have their needs met in a way that satisfies them, so they can say, okay, I was heard in that process. And being heard is probably the number one thing that people want out of these processes.
Yeah.
They may not get exactly what they want, but if they feel like they've been heard, it can go a long way to resolving it for them.
And so what I'm hearing from you, Belinda, is the three things are: get curious, listen by reinforcing back, like what I'm modeling right now.
Exactly.
And then finally, it's about setting the expectations or the wants of where to go from here. So what is the outcome that we want?
Yeah.
It's simple, isn't it? But you think, why?
It really is.
So much. And so tell us then, Belinda, if someone's watching this and they're an organization that's struggling with conflict, and let's face it, I reckon most are, what would you recommend they do as their very first step?
Probably giving me a call.
Yeah.
So if they give me a call, I can talk to them about how I can tailor the services that I provide to their organisation, because no two organisations are ever going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what can we do to move forward and really drill down and get to the bottom of the conflict in the organisation?
Yep.
And so that's probably best place, having a conversation. I can come and meet with them, and get a really good understanding of what they think conflict looks like in the organisation, and then establish a plan to move forward with them. And I would do that in collaboration with them. And map out, depending on what they're looking for, map it out so they can see exactly what's going to happen and what they can expect throughout the process.
Okay, great. And so in summary then, if people are to give you a call, what would be the first thing that you would go through with them? Is it that audit that you talked about? Sorry, what do you call it?
The conflict health check?
Yeah.
So probably what I would do first of all is identify what they think conflict looks like in their organisation. Okay. So they may have some issues that need to be addressed right now. And usually that's why they're calling, is that they've got 2 employees, for example, who are having some issues and they need that to be resolved. So we'd probably look at dealing with that, a plan to deal with that in the first instance, and really then doing the conflict health check to identify where to from here. What does the picture actually look like? And I developed what's called a conflict prescription. So it's basically the written plan on how we're going to change or redefine what the conflict looks like in their organisation.
Fantastic.
So they will know exactly what the process will be over. If we're looking at the transformation through collaboration program, for example, that's a 12-month program. That dealing with conflict or managing conflict for 12 months, and really being able to get in and change how people within that organisation and the organisation as a whole, how they are going to approach it in the future. And so really looking at the end of that 12 months, looking at future-proofing conflict within their organisation.
Yeah, brilliant. And I have to say, it's such a huge need. Like the amount of money, the amount of time, the amount of energy that conflict can cost your organisation, your relationships, your mental health, your physical health is huge. So I would suggest, if you are watching this, folks, by all means reach out to Belinda. How's the best way that people can get in touch with you, Belinda?
Either via email, which is belinda@redefiningconflict.com.au.
Brilliant.
Or just simply give me a call, 0409 130375, and we can go from there. We can map it out and work out exactly what people need.
Perfect. That sounds great. And in summary, is there any one thing you want to leave people with?
Oh, um, I think that the main thing is the message about just develop an understanding. Whenever you're facing conflict or some difficult conversations, do it with understanding and empathy, and try to understand how that situation is impacting the other person. And that's the number one thing that will help people through the process.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Belinda, for joining me and talking about
Thank
the
you.
amazing work you do in your business. For those watching, if you've got conflict, Belinda is your go to gal. And what I love about this is Belinda's also a living example of how any topic can be turned into an incredible business that can literally transform lives and organizations. So thanks for joining me, Belinda. See you all
Thank
next
you so
time.
much. Thank you. See ya.
Bye.